What's up, y'all? SloMoBackSlap here, slapping you with another video, and today we're going to discuss Elden Ring, a game that I just recently beat and continue to play, and thoughts of Elden Ring from someone who is not a From Software fan. I think hearing thoughts from someone who isn't completely head over heels fanboying out for a developer might actually be worth something. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's do this. And the way I will do this is I will do this by categories. And I'm going to go from least important categories to most important so that you guys can get a full view of my thoughts of the entire game in all aspects. So let's do it. So let's begin with the visuals. Clearly not the most important aspect of a game. Important to a lot of people, but not so important that you would choose not to play the game or not. You know, it's not that bad or good. Amazing visuals won't have you play a game that's completely busted with terrible gameplay or terrible story, but it's a nice add-on to the entire package. That said, from an art perspective, Elden Ring is beautiful. You will have moments where you'll stop and just look at the environment, the scenery, and have no choice but to take a screenshot. It's just that beautiful of a game. The attention to detail and armor, the various different looks of weapons and armor. I do believe truly it's a beautiful game from the standpoint of the creativity and the art direction, but that beauty is held back by a outdated engine that already struggled to achieve great visuals with the old style of map design when it came to how From Software made their games. But now that they've made it open world, it struggles even more. So because of its open world nature, this game struggles to hit 60 FPS on any platform. Because of this engine, draw distance is abysmal, and while riding torrent through the environment, you will easily see grass just appear in front of you. While off of torrent and just looking at the grass, you see textures and parts of the environment that, if you check in detail, look like something from 2 generations ago. And so although the art is beautiful, the actual assets that the engine puts forth are clearly lacking. Hopefully in the future, From Software will do a tune-up of this engine to get it up to snuff with what people expect from this current generation when it comes to visuals. Again, not the most important thing, but clearly once you start to fall behind, it's like a sliding scale where people start to care more and more about it as it gets further and further away from what we consider to be normal gameplay graphics in modern games. Additionally, I did want to, this may be a little bit of a nitpick, but just speak about something that is very glaring that I noticed, and it's the clipping of items. For example, you're riding torrent, you have your shield on, or you have a cloak on, just so happen to have a colossal weapon or a big weapon on you as well. The amount of clipping between your weapons, your shields, your clothing that you wear it's a bit annoying. Let's get into the story for a moment for what it is. Now, there's a difference between story and lore. Lore is all the information of the world, the things that have happened already, the background information on bosses that you might fight, or a particular class of enemy, or even the castle that you are at the moment invading. What's the history behind that? That's the kind of stuff that lore is. Story is what's happening in the moment, what's happening with your character, how it's currently progressing. The lore of Elden Ring is wonderful, and I'm so invested in it, so much so that I've watched numerous YouTube videos of people who have put together all the bits and pieces that you can gather within the game of the lore to get that comprehensive view of who these characters are, what they've done, what's happened before, why the world is the way it is. Because story-wise, they do explain these things, but they explain them in such a vague nature that it's almost as if they're not attempting to explain them at all. Story-wise, I don't know the motivation of my character. How does my character actually feel about anything that's going on? So you are a tarnished. And although that is explained to you early in the game, because you lack the context and background information to the world, to what has happened, unless you've watched a YouTube video to explain to you what a tarnish really is, that means nothing to you. Sounds like a cool label, but otherwise, what do you really know? You wake up in this world where you don't know what's going on, but everything is hostile. I mean, the plants are hostile. Everything is hostile to you. And you are tasked with reforming the Elden Ring and putting it into the chaos that's currently ensuing among the various factions of demigods all throughout this land, the lands between. So that's really the foundation of the story, and how you choose to do that and who you choose to side with as you continue to go through the game. It's up to you. There's 6 different endings, and it's alright. Clearly this isn't something that people choose to play From Software games for. They don't choose to play From Software games because the story's excellent, so that's not all that important of an aspect to the game. That said, it could be a bit better with the dialogue. A little less riddles when I speak to you, Ronnie, and a little more exposition of what you need me to do. A little more effort in giving the player a direction when they speak to a character so that they know where to go next if they want to continue that storyline or quest, and a little less pomp when it comes to your speech. That would go a long way. Additionally, how the endings were done, I had somewhat of an issue with, and I think a lot of people probably won't get the regular default ending to Elden Ring, especially if they finished a quest line before beating the game. And I think what I did, a lot of people have done, because when I look at the PlayStation trophy percentage, a lot more people have finished the Ronnie quest line and got the Ronnie ending than the regular ending. And why is that? I don't think it's because they just enjoyed Ronnie's presence so much. I think it's because they did what I did, where they beat the final boss, they're there at the end, and there's a rune that shows up in the ground saying summon Ron, and you have no idea that you're choosing an ending at that point. Like, be clear. Am I choosing this ending here or what? Because I didn't know summoning her was choosing my ending. Be clear with the player is all I'm saying. All that said, lore, the lore's an A. The story, a C. Execution on the endings, D+. Next, let's discuss multiplayer. Something that I do believe within the Souls community seems to be a bit of a debate whether people should or shouldn't be using multiplayer for certain aspects of the game. I'm not going to delve into that debate, 1, because I think it's kind of silly, and 2, because I don't think my opinion would be valued among the people who are debating this part of the game anyway. Regardless of that, let's discuss how multiplayer works and its impact on the game overall. Now, I will start with the fact that this clearly is a game that From Software intended for people to play with their friends more. You have an open world game, you have massive environments and a massive map for you to explore, discover things, and enjoy. But how the multiplayer works, I believe, needed to be updated considering their increased focus on it. So what you have is a very convoluted process of, let me make sure that myself and the person I'm going to play with are at the same grace point in the same region. We have to time ourselves putting down our symbol to join someone else's world with putting up the symbol to have someone join our world. We have to put in passwords and codes in order to make it certain that the person that you want to join is the person whose symbol shows up in your world. And then, even then, things don't show up right away. Even then, you have to deal with the fact that this co-op partner will leave the world as soon as you defeat a boss, and you can't go outside of the region that you first appeared in your co-op friend's world. I understand that these limitations are put in place to make sure that a player isn't relying on another player to get them through the game. I get that. But that said, that still doesn't deter another player from simply crafting another item to bring another player into their world right after beating a boss. It's just providing extra steps to do that. It's not preventing them from actually doing what you don't want them to do anyway. What exactly is wrong with simply having in the menu all of your friends on that platform who are currently playing the game, choosing that person that you want to play the game with, and having the options pop up that say send invite or join game? Now, everything has to be completely different than what other games are doing, because newsflash, some of the stuff that other games are doing are actually pretty worthwhile and actually really beneficial to the gamer. So although I appreciate that multiplayer is there and it allows for some really hilarious moments between me and my friends playing this game, me falling off cliffs, us getting ambushed by disgusting, scary flying birds and Caleb, but the convoluted nature to getting it done kind of hindered the experience just a little bit. Here's an addendum: PvP in invasions. I actually really enjoy those aspects of the game. I enjoy occasionally evading someone just to test to see how good their build is compared to mine. And with my limited experience in Souls games, I usually end up taking the L. Clearly fine with that, right? I also don't mind being invaded, but typically what I noticed was the system that determines when someone will invade you seems to be very limited. I say that because I noticed in certain areas where I continued to get invaded at specific points. For example, while attempting to fight Malekith, I died quite a few times before I finally got him. I kind of feel like he, for me, was the most difficult boss to fight in the game. In fighting Malekith, I feel like every other time that I respawned to attempt to beat him again, as I was approaching the boss arena, running up this ramp, every other time I would get invaded, and now I had to fight this invader, then go back to the grace point to refresh my flask and all my other buff items and stuff after the fight, if I won, or going back to the grace point anyway because I lost. This also happened additionally in Castle Sol, attempting to beat Commander Nail. Every other time I respawned at the Church of Eclipse, I was getting invaded. And so it seems like there are these invasion points where you're constantly being bombarded with invasions in certain areas, but not in other areas, which I would prefer if it was more divvied out better, spread out better, I guess. A small nitpick, but something to think about. And now we're getting into probably the two most important aspects of a From Software game, at least according to my limited experience, and that's combat and bosses. And I'll start with combat first. The combat in Elden Ring is something that I truly enjoy. It's a fabulous experience. I just really enjoy the amount of depth and detail there is with having the endurance to carry heavier armor, and how that armor can affect your ability to dodge, to be agile in a fight, the poise, the ability to withstand punishment before being left prone and vulnerable to an enemy attack, and the various methods that you can choose to fight enemies. Do you want to go with no shield? You can do that, but doing so will make it that you need to be very good at dodging. Do you want to use a shield? Can you parry? Are you good at parrying? This game will definitely teach you to be patient in when you choose to parry or dodge an enemy attack, because enemies will begin an attack and take a really long time sometimes to actually execute it. But regardless of that, how do you want to play the game? Do you want a power stance to the same weapon? I love that there's a completely different animation for that, and that doing so will leave you more vulnerable for attack, but yet allow you to deal more damage to enemies. You want to bleed enemies? You want to rot enemies? How do you want to attack your enemies? How do you want to attack the game? It's all up to you. And I love that versatility and that ability to choose. My character, and I've made 4 of them, but my main character that I beat the game with so far, my 2 other characters I'm close to end game with, but the one I beat the game with was a dual wielding katana warrior who was dual wielding 2 Uchi katanas initially, and then ended up at the end game dual wielding Rivers of Blood and Moonveil katana, completely maxed out. And I love it. What I do is I use the Rivers of Blood in my right hand, the Moonveil in my left, and I'll switch back and forth between the Rivers of Blood for more DPS to the enemy, and then when I need to invade more due to dealing with an enemy that can potentially one-shot me, I will switch my right hand to my Uchi Katana that has the Ashes of War, a Bloodhound step on it, to evade enemies and still do a massive number of damage, because that weapon, that Uchi Katana, is also a plus 25. And that's just how I chose to build my character. Your character could be completely different and yet still be just as effective or more effective. Do you want to use a colossal weapon and just bombard enemies with massive attacks? You can do that. Do you want to run as a mage, wear less armor, be a little bit more vulnerable to enemy attacks, yet attack enemies from a range distance and have that kind of combat experience? You can do that too. Definitely no judgment over here. That level of versatility and ability to choose for the gamer how they choose to play the game, A+. I've got 0 issues with it whatsoever. It's awesome. All right, let's discuss these bosses. So I chose the bosses as more important than the combat because the bosses really define the game, especially when you can play a game, this game in particular, an open world game, and spend hundreds of hours in the game and just completely avoid fighting any bosses. So in order to beat the game, you need to actually progress the story. In order to progress the story, you need to beat some bosses. So therefore, the design of those bosses, their difficulty, is extremely important. I think the build up to some of these bosses like Radon, Godric, Godfrey, Melania, even Renala is just stellar. I love the introduction of the character of the boss before the fight. I also even really enjoyed how they built up the presence of Radon to the fact that you can choose to summon multiple warriors into the arena to also fight him, that it was a festival. It was pretty awesome. That said, there is a high number of reused bosses in this game. You have 140 bosses, I believe. I don't think I've fought probably 50% of them in the 150 plus hours that I played this game, but it just only fighting maybe half of the bosses in this game. I can tell you that in my first playthrough, I fought the Godskin Twins, the Tree Sentinel, Morgott, the Erdtree Sentinel, the Magma Worm, and a multitude of other bosses multiple times, to the point where near the end game I was just tired of seeing them just pop up. A boss that was introduced epically in the beginning of the game is just some guy I come across as I'm on my way to the royal capital. It's just weird how that is. Now, I'm not going to say the bosses are easy or too easy or too difficult. I really didn't feel that was the case, especially considering if you did feel them to be too difficult, you could just summon another player in, or actually summon an NPC that you can build up to actually help you in the fight. And so much so that the Mimic tier summon had to be nerfed, because if your build was that good, you could be a bystander and watch the Mimic tier wash the boss all by itself. So I don't think this is a very difficult game when it comes to the bosses. Overall, I would say overall, because clearly Radon pre-patch and Millennia were on a whole nother level. But then again, you could beat the game and never even fight them. They're optional. But the bosses here are good. That said, if you are a non-Souls fan, you may find these bosses to be hair-pullingly difficult. And if you are a Souls fan, you're probably thinking, man, these were really easy compared to previous Souls games or previous From Software games. But I think what really benefits this game over the previous From Soft games is that because this one is more open world and less linear than those games, that if you're frustrated with not beating a boss, you can just pick up your ball and go somewhere else. You can go fight something else. You can go do something else. You can get different weapons, try a different build. You can level up, do some rune farming. You can do other things in order to get yourself to a point where you're better able to take on that boss later on. And that portion of it makes the game more accessible to just the From Software community. And I do think that's a bonus to this game overall. I'm not done. We gotta talk about this performance. The performance is bad, bro. It's lacking. I am of the mind that anything in 2022 that's below 60 frames per second is a failure. Now, this game isn't overall a failure, but performance cannot be considered good when you can't consistently hit 60 FPS. And on every single platform that this game is on, it cannot consistently hit 60 frames per second. That's on Xbox Series X, that's on PlayStation 5, that's on PC. Even with a 3090, even with the modding community on PC, disabling easy anti-cheat, unlocking the frame rate, you still have hitching with DX12. And so it's gotta get better. It has gotten somewhat better since launch, but it's still not quite where it needs to be. For the most part, I don't notice on PlayStation 5, which I've played this game, many frame rate drops anymore as I did when the game first launched. But that said, I know it's not consistently hitting 60 FPS. And again, not acceptable. From Software, we have to do better here. And hopefully the next game that you launch will be a bit more stable at launch. So overall, Elden Ring is a must-play game. I don't do scores, so you're not going to get a score from me. What you'll get is a recommend or not recommend, and why I choose to recommend or not recommend the game. And I'm absolutely recommending Elden Ring to everyone. Doesn't matter if you're a From Software fan or not. Doesn't matter if you only play walking simulators, or you only play sports games, if you're only a Madden and 2K player and a GTA player, you should play Elden Ring. You should try it. I'm not saying you're going to like it, but it has so much mass appeal to a wide variety of demographics of gamers that you just never know if you'll end up being addicted to this game. It's that good. This is a potential Game of the Year nominee, and I will say probably one of the top games of this current generation already, because I can see the influences of this game permeating throughout the gaming industry. I can see developers and other publishers looking at the success of this game, because clearly it's a success in sales, in engagement, in critical acclaim. And when you have that trifecta, you're going to get other publishers wanting to emulate that success. And a lot of them will fail because they're not From Software and they don't have the template that From Software has. And it's because of that I believe you should give this game a shot. If you already have, then you know what I'm talking about and you've been enjoying the hell out of it. But that's it. This is my review of Elden Ring. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below how you feel about Elden Ring, how you feel about the points that I made. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you liked the video. Hit the dislike button if you didn't. It's all good. And hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content like this in the future. Peace.